Chapter 10 through 14. Okay, I'm giving you an overview of the next 4 chapters here. Now, I'm going to try, I don't think I'm going to be able to cover 10.2, but this will apply to 10.2. Okay? All right. So, the first question that you should ask, and maybe this is my outline. The first question you should ask is this quantitative, categorical, or regression? Okay? So you got 3 things you're looking for. Okay? Is your data quantitative, categorical, or is it regression? Now, depending on the answer to that question, okay, you're going to pick the correct hypothesis test. Okay? Now, I've got 4 types of hypothesis tests. I've got the z-test, I've got the t-test, I've got the f-test, and I have the chi-square test. Okay? Haven't taught you the f-test yet. I'm just kind of preparing you. It's going to come one of these days. Okay? So here's the interesting thing. I asked you if you have 3 types of data, and I gave you 4 answers. Okay? So how do you know whether it's a z-test? Okay? So let's talk a little bit about that. Okay, so if you're looking for a 1 sample mean, that is quantitative data, it could be a z-test. If you're looking for a 1 sample proportion, which is categorical data, it could also be a z-test. Also, if you're looking for a 2 sample proportion, that's also categorical. Okay? So you can see right off the bat, just because it's quantitative or categorical doesn't necessarily tell you whether it's a z-test. Could be, they might not be. Now also, with your t-test, it could be a 1 sample mean, which is also quantitative. Okay? It could be a 2 sample mean, which is quantitative. It could be a paired sample mean, once again quantitative, and I will just add, those are the 2 most confusing tests. How do you decide it's a 2 sample versus a paired sample? Okay, we'll cover that later, I'm just warning you. Number 4, is it a slope test, meaning it's regression? Okay? All right. And I'm not sure this is totally right, but I think it is. So part C, it could be an F test. Okay? That only happens, I'm trying to remember if there's another way, but anyway, the one way that I remember is basically you're going to have multiple means, meaning more than 2. Okay? That's going to be an F test, it's quantitative, and it's called the ANOVA test. Okay? Then we're going to do the chi-square test, okay, which is going to be multi-proportion test, okay, more than 1 proportion. So that's a good thing to be confused with the ANOVA test. It could also be an independence test, or it could be a goodness of fit test. I'm sorry, I'm writing so low on the board. I know you in the back can't see that. So multiple proportions, independence, or goodness of fit test. Okay? Get that? All right. Okay, so here, let me kind of box this in here.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
On the F test, you said multiple means that's more than 2, but then on the chi-squared, multiple proportions is just more than 1.
More than 2.
More than 2, okay.
Yeah, 2 is going to be a Z test.
2, and then those are more than 2.
Yeah, more than 2.
For part B, what are those equal categorical or quantum regression?
Oh, yes, these are all good. These are categorical, all 3 of these are categorical. Okay, good question. I forgot to mention that. Yeah. So chi-square test is always on categorical data. Okay? All right, step number 3 is find the null and the alternative hypothesis. Okay? Now, your null and your alternative hypothesis is going to depend on which test you picked. Okay? Commonly, I'm not going to list them all, but I'm going to list the main categories. Okay? Commonly, you're going to be looking for a mean. You're going to be looking for a proportion. You're going to be looking for a standard deviation or a variance. You may be looking for a difference, or in the book they put mu sub d bar. Okay? Or you could be looking for, well, sometimes they call it beta, or I just like to call it M for slope. You could actually do, we're not going to do this, but I'm just going to mention it to you, you could actually do a test on correlation, missing correlation significance. That one we're not going to do, but we could, so I'm saving you a little bit there. Those are kind of your main types of hypotheses that you're going to be using. Number 4 says find your test statistic. Okay, your test statistic is going to be based on what kind of test you're going to be. Is it going to be a Z? Is it going to be a T? Is it going to be a chi-square? Is it going to be an F? Okay, and which variation of the Z or the T or the chi-square is it going to be? Okay. Step number 5 is going to be find your p-value. Okay? Now your p-value is going to be different. Is it going to be a one-tailed or a two-tailed test? Okay? Depending on what that is. Number 6, you're going to compare to your alpha. Okay, your alpha is your probability of a type 1 error. Okay? Now, it's typically, so here's what I'm going to say about this. If I forget to tell you, assume alpha equals 0.05. Okay? It can be anything you want. The typical ones are 0.01 or 0.10, which tells you the percent you want to be wrong. Do you want to be wrong 1% of the time, 5% of the time, or 10% of the time? Now you can pick any alpha that you want. How often do you want to be wrong? Okay? I will tell you this. When I was up at the University of Utah, I was working at the College of Dermatology. We were trying to figure out the genes that were associated with psoriasis. Psoriasis is a skin condition that makes you really itchy and it's not very fun. Okay? They're trying to figure out what genes were associated with that. And the alpha that they chose was 1 times 10 to the minus 16th power. just to make sure you know what that is, that equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. That's pretty small. Even with an alpha that small, they would come up with 5 or 6 genes that might be associated with psoriasis, okay? Because you have so many genes in your body, okay? So you can choose anything you want. On genetics tests, this is pretty common. Most everything else, this is most common, okay? But you can choose 1 or 10%, okay? All right, so you're gonna compare with alpha. Number 7, you're going to decide, am I going to reject or do not reject? Okay? We never use the A word because we could be wrong. Okay? And then the last step is right conclusion in English, not statistician. Okay, which means relate it back to the problem. You're going to say, oh, we do not reject the null. And somebody looks at you and says, what does that mean? Okay, some of you will be saying that. Okay, so here's what's frustrating to me. You get this right, you get this right, you get this right, you get this right, right, and then you get to here and you write the conclusion exactly backwards. Okay, that can be the hardest part sometimes, is interpreting what the numbers mean. Now, I'd still rather you did that than if you screw this step up. Because if you screw this step up, guess what happens? Everything else is wrong. Okay? So this is really the critical test. And this is what makes this next test so hard, and the one after that, as we keep piling these on. Okay? Now, just so you know, this is actually 10.2. This is what we were supposed to cover today. Okay? What's easy, relatively easy for the homework, is what you're going to find is the homework is going to focus on a specific section. You're going to do a 1 sample proportion. You're going to do a 1 sample mean. Is going to be quantitative or categorical? You're going to be able to pick the right test during the homework. Then on the test, I'm going to jumble it all together. I'm not going to tell you which test to use, and you've got to pick these. That's what makes this so hard. Okay? This is the critical step. Okay, if you get this one wrong, you're in trouble. Okay? So I'd rather you got that wrong than that wrong. Okay? Because you can, if you pick this wrong, you can do all the math right. You might get the conclusion lucky. Okay? So yeah, that's what makes this hard. And so we will spend some time, especially when we do the review, how do you pick the right test? Okay? Because that's really what it comes down to. But this is kind of the outline for the next 4 chapters. Okay? So you're probably going to want to save this page. Notes. You're probably going to want to refer to it. It's going to be very easy for each section because it's always going to be the same test. But come test time, you're going to have to pick that out yourself. Okay? Okay, so what I'd like to do you got done a little bit earlier than my other class, which I'm surprised. Let me do just a couple of examples here. On at least getting an idea Okay? So here's an example. You think people are speeding in 30-mile-per-hour zone. You find the mean speed is 38 miles per hour. Okay? So what I'd like to do, and I haven't given you very much information on purpose here, okay? Let's answer the first question. Based on that example, is this quantitative, categorical, or regression? By the way, we're not going to do regression until chapter 13 or 14. So it's probably going to be quantitative or categorical. Okay?
Quantitative.
Quantitative. Okay? Okay, so this is quantitative for sure. So we've just ruled out a bunch of categorical tests, right? So it's ruled out those, it's ruled out all my chi-square tests. Okay? So we're down to a z-test, a t-test, or an f-test. Okay? So, based on what I've told you, which isn't much, would this be a z, a t, or an f-test? Okay, so I'm hearing z's. Who says z's? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Who says t? 1, 2, 3. Who says f? Nobody, we haven't learned that one yet, right? Actually, that one's easy to eliminate because how many means are we comparing? One mean. Okay, so we're down. So it's got to be a t or a z. So, and this one becomes the question: is it a one sample? Both of them are one sample means. How do you decide if this is a z or a t? Here, I'll just get rid of that. We've eliminated that part.
Isn't T based on sample data?
They're both based on sample
Well,
data.
like, you look at the population, like.
Look at, okay, so you said population. Look at population what? Standard deviation. Okay? So the question is, on whether it's a z or a t, do I know the population standard deviation? Okay? If the answer is yes, it's a z-test. If the answer is no, it's a t-test. Okay? So, do I know the population standard deviation on what I've told you so far? No, so therefore it is a t-test. Okay, and it's going to be a one sample t-test. Okay? Now, let's talk about, let's see, find your null and your alternative hypothesis. So my null and alternative hypothesis, what should that be, Bailey? What'd you say? I don't know. Okay, what are we testing here? We've narrowed it down to a one sample mean. Okay? So what letter should I use? You use mu for mean, right? So mu is going to equal what? Remember, your null hypothesis always equals something. 30. What's your alternative, Brandon? Why did you say greater than? Yes, you think people are speeding. You think they're going faster than 30. Okay? Don't look at your data before you do that. But yes, alpha. Okay, step 6. What's my alpha? 0.05 because it didn't tell you. Okay, so if I compare that to my alpha, does this mean reject or do not? Okay, would you like a nice little catchy phrase that's not politically correct that'll help you? Okay, here's the phrase that pays. If the p-value is low, reject the whole. Okay? Is my p-value lower than my alpha? No. So I do not reject the null. Okay? I do not reject. So step 8 says, write the conclusion in English. What do we want to know? Really, we're asking, are people speeding?
What's considered a low p-value?
Lower than 0.05.
Oh, okay.
Okay? Are people speeding? It kind of looks like it, right? But there is not enough evidence. Okay? So that would be your thing. There is not enough evidence that people are speeding. Okay? All right. So that was just a little introduction. Obviously, I skipped step 4. We're going to save that for tomorrow. So here's what I'd like to do. I'm not going to have a quiz tomorrow. You guys are better. Well, maybe we'll have an attendance quiz. We'll see. Who's here on time? So let's see. So read through 10.2. We will cover 10.2 in its entirety tomorrow. And we'll keep going. But basically, these are the 8 steps that you're going to be doing for the next 4 chapters. Plus, we'll throw some more confidence in there too. Okay?
So our interpretation was there's not enough evidence that people
Are speeding.
are speeding because we're